What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We are officially doing our Peter Pan and Wendy review. Yes, I am not excited at all to do this review. Really, I think we should call this the Wendy and Peter Pan film, which is why my avatar is dressed up like Wendy on crack. But still, I think we're going to just have to stick to the original name, Peter Pan and Wendy. This review is going to be, I believe, in about 3 parts, so stay tuned for the other parts as well. And of course, all I'm going to ask before we get into it, guys, consider giving this video a like so you can help push us out into the YouTube algorithm, and give this video a long view duration. That way we can fight the YouTube suppression that is likely to come from this terrible review that I'm going to have to do for this movie. So with that being said, let's get into the review, guys, for Peter Pan and Wendy, the movie. All right, guys, so a couple of issues that I have with this movie that I've said on stream before, but I guess I will say it openly in this review. Number one, without getting too much into the story right away, obviously they're going to start off with the backstory between Wendy and her brothers, who eventually become part of the Lost Boys, at least temporarily, before they obviously go back at the end of the film. But my issue with this film is, you see this coloring? Do you see this color grading? Like, it's kind of like yellowish, greenish, right? The entire movie has this color grading. The entire movie. It doesn't matter where they're standing. It doesn't matter what they're doing. The entire movie has this yellow slash greenish tint to it, and the color grading is very, very, very depressing to look at. It is extremely, extremely depressing. It is a huge problem for me, and I do not like it, and it makes me just feel like I'm not watching a magical movie, because that's really what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a kid's movie. Can you imagine a kid watching this movie and trying to be excited when it looks this fucking bland? It really is that bad. But let's get into the movie quickly and talk about the story, what's going on. So obviously they're introducing good old Wendy into the film, and they're introducing her brothers as well. Her brothers are playing as Peter Pan and Captain Hook, and doing a little fight scene throughout the house, of course. Wendy makes her way upstairs as the brothers are fighting, and she looks out the window, and she's nearly always depressed, it seems, for some odd reason, because she just doesn't want to grow up. She is about to realize that she has to grow up, and growing up to her is the most scary thing in the world, and she just doesn't want it. She wants to remain a kid forever, it seems, and she's going to soon get her wish, at least temporarily. So she looks out the window, and she decides to join her brothers and stop being so depressed, and she pretends to be Captain Hook and Peter Pan fighting each other. Then the father ends up coming upstairs and asking what the hell is everybody doing, making all the noise and whatnot. And then he says that you are too old for this to be having the type of fun that you're having, basically disencouraging them acting as kids, which makes Wendy depressed all over again, because again, like I mentioned earlier, she does not want to grow up. Her mother tries to come in and speak to her and give words of encouragement and whatnot to Wendy, and Wendy says that she doesn't want to follow her mother's lead. She doesn't want to be like her mother. She doesn't want her mother's life, and that maybe she should have her own life or her own ideas of whatever she may want to do. Her mother tries to convince her to actually just be a regular lady, go to school at a certain age. Maybe she's lucky she can go to school, because back then women didn't really go to school. They were more so in the house, and try to be just a normal lady. And Wendy, of course, being strong, independent woman, Wendy does not want to do that, and even mentions that to her mother. Check this out.
A lady is lucky enough. At a certain age, she goes off to school to get ready for the life ahead of her.
What if I don't want that life?
It's what I did when I was your age.
What if I don't want your life?
So again, Wendy is obviously very depressed and doesn't want her mother's life, or at least that's what she thinks right now. Her mother ends up singing her to sleep, and then all of a sudden they pan outside, where you now have the window flying open, because Tinkerbell opens the window because they have officially found Wendy. Tinkerbell decides to sprinkle pixie dust all over Wendy, which makes her start to float in the air, and then her brothers find her floating, and then she falls to the ground, and she was like, wow, was I really floating? And they say, yes, you were flying. So Wendy gets up off the floor, and Peter Pan ends up making his grand old entrance. Peter Patel, good old scam caller Peter, wants to come in. And again, guys, this is supposed to be a highlight moment in the movie, right? Even though it happens very early, it's supposed to be that moment like, oh, it's Peter Pan, the grand entrance. I felt nothing. I felt literally nothing while watching this particular part. It's honestly quite depressing. It really is, because again, it has nothing to do with his skin color or anything. It is simply put very depressing to look at this movie and try to feel any sort of happiness or excitement or whatever, because it doesn't give that kind of exciting tone to it. So Peter ends up making his way, and they start chasing Peter's shadow, apparently, because Peter's shadow has escaped from his own body, apparently. And Peter, the person who plays Peter, the actor, he is a little strange, because again, in real life, he's very feminine. And not only that, he seems to make the same face in every single scene. He makes this weird, like, scrunching face. And I don't really know why he does that, but he definitely scrunches his face a lot, and it gets really annoying because it seems like he's only capable of one particular facial emotion. So again, it's really annoying. Wendy ends up helping Peter capture his shadow, and Peter ends up asking, "What is a kiss?" And Wendy gives him some object that she says is a kiss, but obviously that's not what they were referencing. Peter ends up saying that he can take them away to Neverland because they've all read the stories and they know Peter Pan's story. And remember, in this particular movie, they already know of Peter Pan. They know of the legend of Peter Pan. They know of his story. They know of Captain Hook. They know of all that stuff. So they just didn't believe that it was real. Now they know it's real because Peter Pan has arrived in their doorstep. Peter Pan takes them to the ledge of the house, which again, not exactly the safest thing in the world. I don't really know why these kids would trust a random stranger to do so. But again, he is flying, so I guess you might believe it if you're a kid. Tinkerbell ends up spraying everybody with good old crack pixie dust, and Peter Pan tells Wendy to think happy thoughts in order to fly. That's the only way that you can fly. So Wendy ends up thinking of her childhood with her mother, and that's what ends up making her fly. So apparently Wendy is very close to her mom. She's just mad because she doesn't want to grow up. She loves the memories of her and her mother and her brothers and her entire family when she was a kid, and she's just getting upset that she's now growing up. All the kids think happy thoughts, they get sprayed with pixie dust, and they start flying, which introduces us to some of the most terrible CGI that I have seen. Again, I've seen some bad CGI, and She-Hulk will always be like that bar that's been set in terms of bad CGI. But this is really bad. Like the entire thing is terrible. I can play you some clips. Check it out. And again, the entire movie just looks so dark. This is supposed to be a magical moment. The kids are flying. It's supposed to be exciting. I know it's at nighttime. I get it. But these lights, I don't know, man. Like the whole tone is just completely set off. So anyway, they end up flying to the clock. I think this is probably the coolest scene in the entire movie just because it had probably the most lighting. But this particular scene is really cool in my opinion, where they go to the clock and they end up warping into a kind of like a time vortex, and they see different stars, different moons, different all that stuff. And eventually they end up getting to Neverland. Check it out.
Morning.
So Wendy touches her reflection and she looks up. She sees a very, very plain island. I'm almost positive Disney has used this same island in movies prior that they've had, but again, it is what it is. This is the plainest looking Neverland I've ever seen. This entire island is super plain. The only exciting thing that you see in this entire movie that even gives you a hint of something magical is the little mermaid people that are in the water as they're flying over, which you can see right here. This is the only thing that gives you any sort of idea like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool, kind of different. Other than that, nothing else gives you that idea. It's just a plain looking island. I've seen more exciting island features on Survivor than compared to this particular island. It's just so boring to look at. But anyway, and you can see what I'm saying. Yeah, it's beautiful, but it's just boring. It doesn't look like a magical place of Neverland, but you know, it's hard for them to want to recreate the animation because they're not trying to recreate the animation. They're trying to make everything so just homogenized and boring. And she ends up landing onto the ground. And again, you have some more terrible CGI moments that I can show you. I mean, just look here. It's pretty bad. And when you see it in motion, it's even worse. At one point, the hat on his head disappears slightly just for a second because the green screen, I guess, just kind of makes it go away and hide. But it's just little things like that show a really bad CGI moment. Check this out. I mean, this is like you can see the strings like holding them up basically. Like you can kind of see how bad it actually is. So they end up flying through and they end up landing. But before they land, you get a little bit of a look at the pirates. And the pirates, obviously, all white with the exception of a couple because they have to have some token diverse characters in there. They got like one or two women, one or two black people, and one or two Asians. And that's basically it. Everybody else is white. And the prominent characters on the pirate ship are all white as well because they want to make sure that you know, the fans, that white people are evil. That's basically what they want you to do. Now, now you get your first look at Captain Hook, who honestly, in my opinion, was one of the best parts of this movie. He did make it bearable when he was on screen, but even he could not do the entire film by himself. Obviously, it was not entertaining enough. Even with him being a decent Hook, it just wasn't entertaining. I also wish he looked more like Hook, you know what I mean? Like, at least give him black hair or something along those lines. But again, they're gonna do what they want to do with this IP because they don't give a shit. So they basically inform him that Peter Pan has been spotted and Peter Pan has returned to Neverland, and Captain Hook obviously has a grudge against Peter Pan, which they go further into in this movie, and we'll talk about it in upcoming reviews. They look at Peter Pan through the telescope and they start shooting at Peter Pan and Wendy. Check this out. The flying is just so bad. I almost wish they didn't even bother flying in the first place, because then maybe the movie will be much more bearable. Because the flying just makes it look so obviously bad, and the CGI becomes very apparent at that point. Not only that, I think part of the reason why they kept this entire movie so dark is the fact that darkness usually hides bad CGI, but this is so bad that you can still see it even in a dark tone like this movie takes. Again, they're just on a regular old island. There's nothing special about it whatsoever. It's just weird, man. So fast forward, you got him doing his little scrunchy face thing again, because like I said, that's all he's really capable of doing. And they end up taking another shot at the kids. Check it out.
Did I hit him? Well, you hit someone, Captain.
So Captain Hook ends up hitting them, but ultimately they land on the beach. Wendy lands on the beach anyway, and she still has her good old pixie dust. She's screaming out for people. She's screaming out for her brothers. She's screaming out for Peter Pan. And who ends up answering with bows and arrows, looking to shoot her, apparently? The Lost Boys, or actually the Lost Girls, or the Lost People, the Lost Kids. I don't really know who you want to call them at this point. And also Super Indigenous Girl, because why? It has to be. Just, you know, whenever they do diverse characters, especially Indigenous characters, they go full Pocahontas with this. Like, there's no way they can make an Indigenous character live in modern times. Not at all. Like, they have to be living in tiki huts. They have to be carrying tomahawks. They have to have a horse. They have to have braided hair. They have to have feathers and stuff like that. That, like, every stereotype about an Indigenous person is in their creation with Tiger Lily. So, of course, you get to see Tiger Lily for the first time, and the Lost Boys are with her. And the weird thing about this, and my biggest issue, is Tiger Lily, she speaks in her own native language. She speaks in her tribe's language. The real life actress speaks in her tribe language. And when she speaks in her language, she follows up with the exact same thing that she said in that language, but in English. So it makes you wonder, why did you even bother speaking in that language in the first place? Because obviously nobody understands you. Nobody in the movie can understand her when she speaks in her language. So then she follows up in English. But because they want to portray diversity, and because they want to portray the Indigenous people, they make sure that she speaks in her language first and then follows up in English, even though nobody understands her and she knows nobody understands her. That's the thing. Like, obviously, when she first met Wendy, you can say, okay, she didn't know if Wendy could understand her or not. All right, not a big deal. But after you realize she doesn't understand her the first time, why would you then have her speak to her in her language a second, a third, and a fourth time? Why would you do that? It makes no sense from the movie aspect. So again, it's just such a lazy form of diversity. It's stereotypical, and it's what you always expect when you get something from Disney. So then you get this little scene right here, because of course they have to remind you that the Lost Boys are no longer the Lost Boys. But check this out.
Are you Tiger Lily?
He's doing the energy.
Which means you must all be
Lost Boys.
every last one of us.
But you're not all boys.
So?
But I guess it doesn't really matter.
So they made it a point to tell you that it doesn't really matter, right? Obviously, they want you to know that the girls are part of the Lost Boys now, and they're still keeping the Lost Boy name, even though you have girls in it now. But the funny thing is, girls were not part of the Lost Boys in the original Peter Pan because they were considered too smart to get lost in the first place. So by you adding lost girls into the group, you basically say that girls are as dumb as boys. That's essentially what you're saying by going based off of Peter Pan lore. So it's something that Disney must be okay with. I guess they're fine with making women stupid in the sake sake of diversity, but that's neither here nor there. But Wendy, of course, has to tell you that, oh, I guess it really doesn't matter then. It's the small cues that they're trying to put out there to make you realize that they want to erase gender, they want to erase sex and all that stuff. They're trying to make it seem as, oh yeah, the girls could be part of the Lost Boys. Why not? It doesn't really matter. They want you to realize that for them, they want you to remember none of this matters. That's what they want you to think. But to them, obviously, it does matter. It mattered enough to change it. And then you have the introduction of a character who I think is pretty cool. I just am really sad about it because, again, I know that this is a good thing. They're introducing a Down syndrome person as a character, which is great. You know what I mean? I like to see Down syndrome people having more opportunities like this. But again, it's unfortunate that it has to be Disney because I know Disney is not doing it with good intentions. They're using him to check off a box, and it's really quite unfortunate because he actually does a great job in his character. He has a few lines and he portrays it very well, and shout out to him for doing such a good job. So the Lost Boys end up showing Wendy how to use the little fake telescope thing that she's never known how to use, but apparently she knows how to use it right off the bat, which is weird. And then we have a scene where her brothers are obviously caught by Captain Hook. They interrogate them a little bit, asking about Peter Pan. You explain the rules of the ship, and then one of the rules is don't bring watches, don't mention Peter Pan's name, and they say screw it anyway, we're gonna mention Peter Pan's name. Check it out.
Come to Neverland.
We came with.
Remember the rules! Do not say his name.
We don't care about your rules. We came with Peter Pan.
And he's gonna rescue us.
So they make it a point to showcase, again, the one or two female pirates, the one or two black pirates, and everybody else is white in the background. Captain Hook threatens the two brothers, of course. Tiger Lily and Wendy try to figure out a way to rescue her brothers from Captain Hook, and they end up going to a cave, and this is where the entire first fight scenes happen. We're about 35 minutes into the movie, and we're going to end this video here so that we can begin in part 2. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy it, and if you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys in part 2. Hypnotic out.